A woman suffered from an intestinal worm, and the cleverest doctors despaired of curing her. Accordingly, she went to Epidaurus and prayed the god that she might be rid of the complaint that was lodged in her. The god was not at hand. The attendants of the temple, however, made her lie down in the place where the god was in the habit of healing his petitioners, and the women lay quiet as she was bid, and the ministers of the god addressed themselves to her cure. They severed her head from the neck, and one of them inserted his hand and drew out the worm, which was a monstrous creature. But to adjust the head and to restore it to its former setting, this they always failed to do. Well, the god arrived and was enraged with the ministers for undertaking a task beyond their skill, and himself, with the irresistible power of a god, restored the head to the body and raised the stranger up again. The Sanctuary of Asclepius in Epidaurus was a religious site dedicated to the demigod Asclepius. The sanctuary was of significant importance, not just to Greece, but the wider Mediterranean world during antiquity. It was the primary holy site of Asclepius and rivaled major cult sites in Greece, including Apollo at Delphi and Zeus at Olympia. Although he was not one of the 12 major Olympian deities, his cult following rivaled them primarily due to his role as god of medicine. Variations on the timeless adage, "What good is anything without one's health?" appears to have been a concern throughout the existence of humanity. Humanity's recognition of the importance of good health would explain why the Sanctuary of Asclepius enjoyed such success, with present archaeological evidence suggesting its operation as a sanctuary from 600 BC during the Greek Archaic period until 426 AD, when it was closed by the Christian Roman Emperor Theodosius II. When we consider that this represents a 1,000-year time period, as well as the costs necessary to run a sanctuary as big as the one here, we can begin to understand just how important and visited the Sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus was. There appears to be general agreement that Asclepius was a son of Apollo and a human woman named Coronis. Since there's no official religious text in ancient Greek religion, however, there are a number of competing origin myths regarding the birth of Asclepius. In fact, the Greek travel writer and geographer Pausanias mentions 3 different birth stories. Here is a quote from one of the 3 birth stories told by Pausanias, in which the mother Coronis attempts to conceal her pregnancy by Apollo from her father. When he went to the Peloponnesus, he was accompanied by his daughter, who all along had kept hidden from her father that she was with child by Apollo. In the country of the Epidaurians, she bore a son and exposed him on the mountain. As the child lay exposed, he was given milk by one of the goats that pastured about the mountain and was guarded by the watchdog of the herd. Interestingly, there are multiple authors from antiquity that note that at various sanctuaries to Asclepius throughout the Mediterranean, the sacrifice of goats was prohibited, presumably in recognition of the goat that he nursed upon when he was abandoned. We will also see that Asclepius is often depicted with a dog, again in recognition of the watchdog that looked over him when abandoned. A third animal associated with Asclepius, and not mentioned in his birth story, is the snake. The snake is shown entwined with a staff, commonly referred to as the rod of Asclepius, and used frequently today as symbols in various medical societies worldwide. There are countless papers on the importance of the snake in ancient Greek religion, but the rough synopsis is that they represented rebirth, wisdom, and a very close association with the earth, and therefore the underworld where the dead resided. The central aim when visiting the Sanctuary of Asclepius was the act of consulting with Asclepius himself via one's dreams, following a purification stage of catharsis involving baths, dietary changes, and various methods of purges. The patient was then ready for incubation, which is the religious practice of sleeping in a sacred area. This took place in a colonnaded hall called the Abaton, where the patient was dressed in white and slept on a pallet. While asleep, the patient may be visited by Asclepius or one of his daughters, such as Hygeia, the goddess of cleanliness, or Panacea, the goddess of the cure. The patient in their dreams may also be visited by Asclepius in the form of an animal, such as a dog or a snake. In these dreams, the patient might be told a prognosis or instructed on actions necessary to effect a cure. You may have noticed that I used the word patient rather than pilgrim or suppliant, and certainly there is an argument to be made that much of this was faith healing, and therefore it was nothing more than a religious exercise. In many cases it was. However, as mentioned previously, the sanctuary spans a 1,000-year time period, and with time, the methods for healing progressed from faith-based to the early practice of rudimentary medicine. Early in the history of the sanctuary, the patient might sleep at the Abaton and be cured by Asclepius that very night, or instructed by the god to perform certain tasks to quickly resolve the ailment. As the centuries passed, priests were added to interpret the dreams that patients had, adding in their own practical knowledge of medicine in their interpretation. Later, the priestly structure became more defined, with those that were in charge of the catharsis and incubation rituals, and those that interpreted the dreams and prescribed the treatments. From this latter priestly class emerged the proto-physician, diagnosing disease, prescribing treatments, and evaluating results, not just based upon the dream reported by the patient, but also the patient's symptoms and physical presentation. Many treatments, particularly by the time of Imperial Roman rule, were no longer handled in a single day, but entailed several days of treatment, in a cross between a modern medical resort spa and an inpatient medical ward. Here at the Sanctuary of Asclepius, long-term housing for patients, libraries, baths, gymnasiums, and even a theater were present. One of the hallmarks of treatment here was the holistic approach towards the health of a patient. A patient might be prescribed exercise at the gymnasium or reciting religious hymns at the theater. This is not too different from our modern-day practice of medicine, as one might be prescribed physical therapy for an injured knee or cardiovascular exercise following a heart attack, which we can easily imagine happened at the Sanctuary of Asclepius. The priest may not have understood the pathophysiologic mechanism of a disease, such as arthritis of the knee or depression, but through trial and error, probably had a rough idea how some activities could alleviate the symptoms of such pathologies. The metamorphosis of the Sanctuary of Asclepius to a medico-religious institution continued, as evidenced by the construction of several ancillary buildings over the centuries. Take, for example, this dormitory building consisting of 4 square units, with no communication between the 2 eastern units and the 2 western units, thereby allowing for isolation between the 2. The priests would have intuitively recognized isolation as being important for contagious diseases, though they had no understanding of bacteria and viruses. Within these sanctuaries to Asclepius, new theories on disease and the very beginnings of empirically based medicine emerged. The famous physician Hippocrates received his medical training in an Asclepion, or a sanctuary to Asclepius, on the Greek island of Kos. He is often credited to be the first to believe that diseases were caused naturally, rather than being of a divine nature. I'm about to discuss the disease called sacred. It is not, in my opinion, any more divine or more sacred than other diseases, but has a natural cause, and its supposed divine origin is due to men's inexperience and to their wonder at its peculiar character. Hippocrates also defined the ethical duty of the physician, codified in the Hippocratic Oath, still recited by many medical students when they begin their training. I swear by Apollo healer, by Asclepius, by Hygeia, by Panacea, and by all the gods and goddesses, making them my witnesses, that I will carry out, according to my ability and judgment, this oath and this indenture. I will use those dietary regimens which will benefit my patients according to my greatest ability and judgment, and I will do no harm or injustice to them. Neither will I administer a poison to anybody when asked to do so, nor will I suggest such a course. Returning back to the Abaton, where the patients slept, there are 2 important adjacent structures. One is the Temple of Asclepius, of which little remains. Pausanias provides a description of a statue of Asclepius, presumably located at the temple. The god is sitting on a seat grasping a staff. The other hand he is holding above the head of the serpent. There is also a figure of a dog lying by his side. Adjacent to the temple and the Abaton is the Tholos. This circular building of white marble continues to remain a mystery as to its function. Pausanias mentions it in his writings, however, only states that it contained marble slabs detailing the names of individuals who had been healed by Asclepius. Here we have a stele commissioned by Marcus Julius Apelles, who suffered from gastrointestinal issues, expressing his gratitude to Asclepius. He was started on a treatment course of dietary modifications, exercise, and other naturopathic treatments. His diet is noted to be primarily bread and cheese, accompanied with celery and lettuce. He was encouraged to drink citron juice with water, as well as milk mixed with honey. His baths were combined with mud treatments. His treatment also included running, walking, and studying in the sanctuary's library. The purpose of the Tholos remains a mystery. We know that it was composed of 6 concentric rings based upon examination of the foundation. However, the exciting architectural feature is that below the floor of the building was a vault composed of 3 circular passages and a small circular room in the center. One popular theory is that the Tholos, particularly its underground vault, was a symbolic conduit between the world of the living and the underworld of the dead, that it represented a mechanism by which Asclepius could arise from the underworld at night and consult with his patients at the Abaton through their dreams. The Sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus, along with Asclepions throughout the ancient world, represented a wonderfully interesting medico-religious approach to medicine. They incorporated elements of faith-based healing, placebo effect, and early rudimentary medicine, which appears to have been successful based upon their pervasiveness and size throughout the ancient world. In fact, many might argue that the ubiquitous Catholic hospitals and clinics found throughout the world today are descendants of the traditions first practiced at the Sanctuary of Asclepius. If you enjoyed this talk, please like, comment, subscribe, and check out my other videos on antiquity.